Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 1st of July 2011. My name is Totalbiscuit, bringing you a daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, that's mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, with topics for future shows. The game in the background is Heroes of Might and Magic 6, the beta version. I'll be bringing you a full, detailed WTF is of that very shortly. This one comes in from Sean the Original. It says, I was reading MMO Champion and the post at the top of the page was talking about the guild stars. When 4.2 hit, they breezed through Firelands normal, faction changed to reset their raid cooldown, and started working on Firelands heroic. A lot of people may see this as cheating, except for the guild Exodus, but that's another story for another time. I'd like to hear your view on this situation. Is stars really cheating, or is there clever use of game mechanics? Personally, I don't see a problem with this. The main issue is that they aren't waiting a week to bulldoze a raid that they're going to realm first on anyway. It seems to me by faction changing like that, they're just saving themselves a week's worth of waiting to do the inevitable. But at least they aren't changing servers to steal some other realm's realm first, like another guild no one cares about anymore. Yeah, oh god. It's just a sad reflection on the state of WoW at the minute, isn't it? It really, really is. World firsts and things like that have not mattered for a very long time, and that's really Blizzard's fault for just taking the raid scene and turning it into an epics dispenser. Nerf after nerf after nerf after nerf. It's very difficult to care about raiding and world first and things like that anymore when you see that happening over and over and over again. In this case, I am actually kind of surprised that another guild didn't do this first. When the faction transfer system first came in, we noticed that it reset your raid cooldowns. And what a lot of us were saying at the time was, ooh, I wonder which guild will be first to use this in order to get an advantage. And in this case, there you go, Stars apparently thinks that it's worth doing. I think the problem really is the fact that these guilds who have evidently already beaten the whole goddamn thing in the PTR actually have to wait to go into the heroic mode. It is just very, very silly indeed. And this comes down to, in my opinion, a core design problem. And that core design problem is that a lot of these heroic modes are designed with massive amounts of gear in mind, and it doesn't actually come down to skill. And that's why they're gated in the way that they are. As far as I'm concerned, the way that the game should be is it should have several difficulty settings and have them all, bar maybe the absolute top one, available from the start. So if you had it like, say, DDO, which has 4 difficulty settings, you'd have the first 3 unlocked initially, and then the really good guilds would go on to hard, and then maybe they could unlock elite after that, if you really wanted to have some kind of gating mechanic like that. But then you can just go in there straight away and say, hey, you know, we're awesome, and because we're awesome, we're going to be able to take this out. And then you can give the easy raiding experiences to those who want to run casual or whatever. In this case, it looks like the Firelands heroic stuff is obviously not all that gear dependent. Although that said, we are looking at a very minor difference between the gear from Tier 11 Heroic, which I believe was item level 372, and the drops from Firelands, which are around 378 to 379. So you could probably pull it off. That's not a huge difference in stats right there. And I suppose that's a good thing to start with, because it indicates to me that gear is less important in Heroic Firelands as opposed to actual skill level, which, as far as I'm concerned, should be how it is. Sure, you want to get gear to give yourself more oomph and give yourself more leeway, but at the end of the day, you shouldn't be getting one shot because you are a couple of item levels lower than what the dungeon arbitrarily says you should have. To me, it seems like Stars just don't care, and they just want to get on with the heroic stuff, and I can hardly blame them for doing this, really. It's dumb that the mechanic's even there to begin with. I mean, did Blizzard seriously not see this coming? It indicates to me that Blizzard don't actually care about world firsts, and to be fair, there's never been any evidence that they have. And that is a very sad thing indeed, considering that raiding is the primary activity for a lot of their player base, and really the only thing that the game does exceptionally well at the end game. The rest of it, well, it's just not so great. That said, when you let your players test and defeat the content on the PTR before releasing it live, what the hell do you expect to happen? Why should we care about world firsts when all of this content has already been done on the PTR? For God's sake, Stars has already killed several heroic bosses. That's absurd! Come on, the dungeon was out for a day, and this happens. And people really think that this is going to actually give people enough content for the next few months. And yes, I know Stars are absolute bleeding edge, but what that means is that all of these strategies are going to leak onto the internet, and the guides will be there, and people will be able to defeat this stuff much, much easier. And also, it comes down to, well, what are these guys going to be doing for the next few months once they've beaten all of this stuff? well, they're just going to be farming items and maybe getting some achievements, I suppose, and that really is about it. I find it very difficult to care about World of Warcraft anymore, particularly the raiding scene, and this just solidifies my opinion in that regard. And to me, it's the downfall of what I liked in the game, and it's just going to the dogs, so I'm unsubscribed. I've been unsubscribed for a little while now. And to be fair, I'm not actually missing it in any way, so the likelihood of me returning to WoW with all of this nonsense continues. It's not Star's fault for taking advantage of a mechanic that Blizzard put in the game in order to make more money. No, it's Blizzard's fault for really devaluing the raiding scene to the point where guilds just do not care anymore, and they're willing to just do stuff like this just to get onto content that is less awful. And when it comes to the Firelands normal, well, Star's Ruffle stomped it in a night, as did any guild of note. Just want to point out, by the way, that in the first day, Ragnaros was killed by 200 guilds. Yes, the dungeon was beaten in like 4 hours. So, there you go. That did not happen in Tier 11 content. Think about that for a second. Ouch, not a good start. This one comes in from Chris P. that says, while watching the mailbox of the 30th of June, I listened to you talking about Connect and Move. You mentioned developers being restricted as such with graphical potential because of outdated hardware. Owning an Xbox, myself, I understand your point. The limits are very obvious. There is no upgrading as such of a console unless they release a completely new one. However, I feel this argument is very fussy. In my honest opinion, graphical mastery should be one of the last things developers should work on. Solid, enjoyable gameplay should surely come first, or maybe a detailed, integrated plot. This is how I decide on a game anyhow. For example, I've spent over £50 on old equipment, like a GameCube or a PS2, as well as games for these. Why the focus on constant graphical improvement, especially given it seems to be coming at the expense of well-developed games? My counter-argument to that would be that developers are going to spend money on graphics because people care about graphics. I'm sorry, they do, especially console gamers. They keep buying these big blockbuster games that boast the very best graphics that system has to offer. They continue to buy these things. You can't make a big blockbuster game like, say, Call of Duty or Gears of War or Halo without the best graphics you have available to you on the system. And you've got to spend a lot of money making sure that it is as good as it can be. And obviously, developers also have to spend a massive amount of time getting every last drop of juice out of that system to get the best quality graphics imaginable. You can't just slack off on your graphics when it comes to FPS. I'm sorry, you cannot do it. You will get hammered for it, and people won't buy your game. Why? Because they're superficial frickin' idiots. PC has less of a problem in that regard, and funnily enough, it's actually the platform that doesn't need it. I mean, we have people that buy Minecraft and Terraria and things like that, and obviously the graphics in those games are very, very basic to say the least. But we have a lot of power at our disposal. We could get the best graphics imaginable, far superior to any console. And yet, those kind of games aren't as popular on a console. They really aren't. Hell, Fortress Craft, which is a Minecraft clone for the 360, actually looks significantly better, and they polished the graphics up. And I suppose it's because if you had something that looked like Minecraft on a 360, maybe people wouldn't buy it. I suppose we'll find out when Minecraft Connect comes out, won't we? But while you do have a lot of arcade games and the downloadable stuff, you can't sell a full-priced release for a console with subpar graphics. I wish you could, but you can't. So a lot of time is being spent on the graphics and on the set pieces and things like that. And yes, less time is being put into the writing, into the game mechanics, into innovation. The problem is that having a limited system is not encouraging innovation and less focus on graphics. It's actually causing developers massive headaches in terms of saying, oh, well, we've got to keep up with the big blockbuster releases, because if our FPS looks worse than Modern Warfare 2 or Black Ops or Halo Reach or whatever, then nobody's going to buy it. And that's just the nature of the people that play on our consoles. And that sucks. It really does. I want developers to take a step back from that. I wouldn't mind if an FPS looked like Unreal 2004. I really, really don't. I play Killing Floor, and Killing Floor still looks great even though it's on the Unreal 2004 engine. I'm totally okay with games looking like Half-Life 2 and things like that. You know, if a game looks like it's 5 years old, but it plays really well, fine. The problem is that console gamers, generally speaking, do not go for that. There are some exceptions. There are some games that have done fairly well, especially in the cult scene, like Concept Saga, for instance, which is not a very good-looking game at all, but it is great. I mean, it's like a mixture of Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, and Monopoly. It's a wonderful game for the 360. It's kind of hard to get hold of, but if you can, by all means, go for it. I don't think it's out in Europe at all, and it's not compatible with our 360, so that kind of sucks. I know there's a PS2 version as well. I would love to have a 3DS version of Concept, by the way. That would be the best thing in the world. If that comes to 3DS, I will probably dance, and I might even film it. But whatever the case, there's other things like Deadly Premonition, which was primarily popularized by Something Awful, as well as, of course, Giant Bomb. And that has terrible graphics, but, of course, people really like that. But most of the time on console, the games that are popular are the ones that look really, really good in one respect or another, and that really does suck, but it is the reality of our market. What are you going to do about that? I can't think of a single thing. This one comes in from a Haz that says, I'm not sure if you know about this, but Capcom is not on my favorite side right now. They really haven't been since God Hand, but whatever. If you're dissing God Hand, I will actually find you and lay the pimp smack on you. There is no question about that. You dare. God Hand is one of the best games ever. Anyway, there is an article that basically states that on the new Resident Evil game for the 3DS, it's got one save file for life. Like, you won't be able to delete the data and start afresh. You can't lend your game to a sibling because they can't start a new game. They would have to buy a new game to play from the start. Now, I know that Capcom hasn't really had a great relationship with its consumers, but if they are so desperate, why can't they meet with the stores, make a deal for Capcom to have a percentage of the used sales? Or better yet, why not just go for the PC with no used sales? I don't see what they're trying to do. It seems incredibly selfish. Even though they claim it has nothing to do with used games, we know that's BS. What are your thoughts on this? Yeah, you're damn right it's BS. Of course it's got everything to do with used sales. You'd have to be an idiot not to believe that it's got everything to do with used sales. And if you have one saved file, there's no way to reset it, then of course you cannot trade it in. And stores are actually boycotting it. EB Games in Australia, I believe, has boycotted this. I actually have this game in my hand. This is what it sounds like. This is the sound of one saved file. This is the sound of one saved file opening, one saved file closing. There you go. Whatever the case. Capcom's explanation for this makes no sense. It's like, it had absolutely nothing to do with used games whatsoever. And they go on to say that, well, it's arcade-style gameplay and it lends itself to the save system. There's no intention of lessening the experience of the game. Essentially, Resident Evil The Mercenaries 3D was treated like an arcade fighting game. You unlock characters and levels, etc., and they just stay unlocked as they would on an arcade machine. There's no hidden motive to prevent buying used copies. It's not some secret form of DRM. It's simply the way we designed the save system to work with the arcade type of gameplay. That doesn't make any sense, Capcom! There's plenty of games where you unlock levels and characters and skills, and you can still have multiple bloody save files. So, what does that mean? It doesn't really hurt the idea of handing it around to your siblings, I guess, or lending it to a friend, because they can then play on that. Maybe they can unlock some new stuff and then they can hand it back. So, to be fair, that's not all that problematic. Although, still, some people, in fact, I'd say an awful lot of people, games like this retain their lastability, and they don't become boring because you unlock stuff. They become more and more boring once you unlock everything. If you have unlocked everything, then all you really have left is high scores. So, to me, it really, really is an anti-used game feature. I can't think of any other legitimate reason for it. Otherwise, it's Capcom being crazy again, which is not unknown. I mean, Capcom have been known to overreact to stuff. For instance, Street Fighter 4 sold pretty well on PC, but it was pirated quite a lot, so they decided we're not going to release Super Street Fighter 4 on PC at all. And then they came back and said, sorry, here's Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition, which is coming out later. And I just scratched my head at that. It's like, sorry Capcom, every game gets pirated. It does. It sucks, but it's the way that it is. So, for God's sake, stop punishing legitimate consumers because of the actions of a few frickin' idiot neckbeards. I want to see games publishers rewarding people for purchasing new games, not punishing them for buying them new. This issue is a very, very complex one, I've got to say. I totally understand where publishers and even developers get upset, because a used game sale does not translate into anything, and I do mean anything. for the developer and publisher at all, which I feel is vastly unfair, and I think that retail chains should get that into their freaking heads. As far as I'm concerned, there should be a licensing system. You cannot sell used games unless you sign up to this and you give a portion of the profits back to the goddamn developer and publisher, because that seems like a fairly reasonable system. That said, that doesn't apply to stuff like used music and used books and stuff like that, so I don't know how viable it is, and I know that there's been no success in making that happen up until this point, and there's all sorts of posturing between brick and mortars as well as distributors, publishers, and developers. But in the case of Resident Evil, I really do think it actually is an anti-used game sales thing, and that's unhealthy when it comes to 3DS games. 3DS games are pretty expensive to begin with. I mean, a lot of 3DS games in the UK are £35 to £40 each. That's very expensive for a portable game. It's much more expensive than it is in the States, where portable games are generally between 30 to 50% cheaper, if you can actually believe that. Trading in can allow people that otherwise wouldn't be able to purchase more new games by trading in ones that they've finished with. And all I can say to developers is, if you make a game good enough, people won't want to get rid of it. That's something to consider, isn't it? Raise the quality of your game, raise the replayability of your game, and the chances are people want to keep it on the shelf as opposed to throw it away for something else. Okay, folks, so we are covering Steam sales, as always. I had a stupid couple of comments yesterday. Hey, he's selling out. I am not being paid by Steam. Are you freaking crazy? Good God in heaven. News just in, folks. Anyone that reviews games, even in a very, very small fashion, is obviously being paid by the retailer. Stab in the face over the internet, you insufferable dolts. Okay, first deal is Shogun 2 Total War, 40% off. It's a very, very good slash of a very, very good game. And if you are into the Total War games in any way, shape, or form, you should definitely pick this one up. If you've never played a Total War game before, this would probably be a good place to start. It's easy to get into, and it's got an awful lot of depth to it, and the majority of the problems were fixed on launch, so that's pretty good. Call of Duty Black Ops, 33% off. I would avoid it, considering that Modern Warfare 3 is on its way. Black Ops multiplayer is not particularly good. It's got a bunch of problems that were never fixed, so I wouldn't concern yourself too much with Black Ops. The single player certainly is not worthwhile. GTA Classics Pack, 75% off. Oh, yes, that's what I'm talking about. And Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, and San Andreas actually run properly on PCs. They were reasonable ports as opposed to GTA 4, which certainly was not. GTA 2 still remains my favorite of the lot, followed very closely by Vice City. And it is a very good price for that selection. There's a lot of gameplay there. Big fan. Dungeons, 66% off. I can't tell you much about this. I tried to play it and just got completely confused. What I can tell you is that it is not Dungeon Keeper. If you think that it's Dungeon Keeper, you are horrendously mistaken. It's kind of like a dungeon management game, sort of, crossed with a tower defense. It's just weird. If you're looking for something very unique, you could probably do worse. Admittedly, these prices are not amazing. Dungeons is already very expensive to begin with. Even knocking it down 66%, it's kind of pricey. So I can't really give a recommendation on that one, I'm afraid, just because I don't know enough about it. Devil May Cry 4, 50% off. Good price for what is a good spectacle fighter game. It's a very nice port, actually. It runs really, really well on the PC, as do most of the more modern Capcom titles. I would recommend playing it with a gamepad as opposed to a mouse and keyboard for obvious reasons. Beware, because Devil May Cry 4 has time jumping puzzles in it, and that's not very fun at all. In fact, a lot of the Devil May Cry games do suffer from too much jumping puzzle and not enough slashy. The next one is Just Cause 2, 75% off, including all of the DLC for 75% off as well. You would be absolutely stupid not to buy Just Cause 2, by the way. Just bear in mind that game does not run on Windows XP. You have to have Windows Vista or Windows 7 in order to make that happen. So it is an absolutely astonishingly good game. It really, really is absolutely fantastic. Graphical fidelity on that game is amazing. It's a really, really good port as well. It plays like a PC game. It's got a huge amount of content and some of the best physics and absolute nonsense situations you can ever imagine. It's brilliant. It is just absolutely brilliant. The original is also 75% off. Not quite as good, although if you don't have as good a PC, then you can certainly do worse picking that one up. It barely costs anything. As regards to the DLC, the Black Market Boom Pack, the Black Market Aerial Pack, those are both definitely worth having. The stuff like the Agency Hovercraft and the Bullseye Rifle, not so much. Admittedly, they are very, very cheap. And I would pick up the Monster Truck DLC, because it's about 18 cents, so that's pretty good as well. But definitely pick up those two, the Boom Pack and the Aerial Pack. They add an awful lot to the game. Okay, next one on the list would be Railworks 2 Train Simulator. I think if you are into this kind of thing, you probably already know. And if you're not, then there is very little point in picking it up, so yeah. Next one is Braid, 75% off, one of the most pretentious but very clever platform puzzle games you will ever have the pleasure to play. I would recommend you pick it up if you're into that kind of thing. Personally, I found the entire game insufferable, but that's my personal preference as opposed to any objective problems with it. Speaking of insufferable, here's Space Scam, 66% off. I'm told that this is absolutely astonishing, and it is by far the genre that I think I hate the most. It is a puzzle game, and I really am not a fan of it in any way, shape, or form. It's a brain bender, but it has rave reviews from all across the board. So if you're into puzzle games, Space Chem will definitely get you going. Speaking of puzzle games, and this one I actually like, Hamilton's Great Adventure by Fat Shark. An absolutely wonderful game. Really, really great. A lot of fun, a great deal of character to it, and a lot of content. I would recommend that you pick it up without question. There is a WTF is of it, and you can check it out on my channel. Heroes of Might and Magic 5, complete pack for 75% off. This includes Heroes 5, Hammers of Fate, Tribes of the East, and Dark Messiah of Might and Magic. Hell, that is worth it for Dark Messiah alone, which is a hilarious game, I might add. I'm going to have to put that in the background of one of my mailboxes sometimes. It's so good! It's absolutely bonkers. I love it. Heroes of Might and Magic 5... as far as I'm concerned, is really good. The only problem I've got with it is the turn times that are inexplicably long. Aside from that, it's a really great game. If you don't have a lot of money, just get Tribes of the East. You can download the campaigns from the original and Hammers of Fate online for free, and Tribes of the East does contain everything that the others do. So that is worth grabbing. And last but by no means least, Knights of the Old Republic, the franchise, as it were, which is not really correct. I don't know why it's saying franchise. It's Knights of the Old Republic, 75% off, which... absolutely worthwhile. One of the best RPGs I've ever had the pleasure to play. Admittedly, very much good and evil, ridiculous extremes in terms of its dialogue options and stuff like that, but it is a fantastic RPG. Force Unleashed 2, really, really short, very disappointing in a lot of reused areas. I would avoid it personally. It doesn't run all that well either. And Empire at War Gold Pack, yeah, that was a pretty good game, actually. I enjoyed it an awful lot. Petroglyph's effort at a Star Wars RTS. A lot of good space fighting, not so much good ground fighting. The space battles themselves are probably worth it, and there is a space battle skirmish mode with a full set of rules that actually allows you to build ships while you are in space, which is not the same as the campaign, which is cool. You could just play it as a space battle RTS, and it's actually pretty fun. Battlefront 2 I can't really talk about because I've never played it, but it is very, very cheap, and if you can get a multiplayer game of it, you'll probably have a laugh with it. Okay, folks, that's me done for the day, and indeed done for the week. Thanks a lot for watching the Mailbox. Have a safe and stellar weekend, and I will see you next time.